Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's session, National Service and the Transition to Adulthood in America. My name is Tony Salazar. I'm here, and I will be your MC today. A little about myself. I'm a senior from Henry Sibley High School in Mendota Heights, Minnesota, and I am a member of the National Youth Leadership Council's Youth Advisory Council, and I am involved with the Latino-focused group at my school called Anglos Latinos Motivados de Superarse, or ALMAS for short, and I'm also very involved with East Metro Integration District's Youth Executive Board. I'm thrilled here today to welcome you to this exciting session and introduce our featured speakers. Harris Wofford represented the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in the United States Senate from 1991 to 1994. He brought universal health care into the national spotlight by making it a core issue of his campaign and Senate service. In the 1960s, Senator Wofford served as President Kennedy's special assistant for civil rights and worked closely with Sergeant Shriver in organizing the Peace Corps. He became an advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1950s after the Montgomery bus boycott. Robert Gordon is the chairman of...
He's not here today.
Okay. Shirley Sagawa is the author of The American Way to Change, How National Service and Volunteers Are Transforming America. She is co-founder of Sagawa Jossman, a consulting firm that has provided strategic counsel to nonprofits and foundations since 2001. She also serves as a visiting fellow with the Center for American Progress and on the Leadership Council of the Aspen Institute's Franklin Project. Shirley also served on the first Bush and Clinton administrations and in the Obama transition. Jason Managone serves as director of for the Franklin Project. Jason served as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps from 2006 to 2010. As a platoon commander with the 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, he led Marines on 3 deployments in Iraq, the Middle East, and Haiti. Jason left the Marine Corps and went on to work as a research associate in the Military Fellows Program at the Council on Foreign Relations from 2010 to 2011. He graduated with a BA in Political Science from Boston College in 2006 and an MA in International Relations from Yale's Jackson Institute for Global Affairs in 2013. Please join me in welcoming the distinguished panel of guests to the stage.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony. Well, good morning, everybody. So nice to have you join us. Thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us this morning. We're delighted. My name is Kalita Bach. I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of the National Youth Leadership Council, and I am delighted to welcome each of you to the stage. We're recording this session, so please feel free to be interactive and engage with us as well. We will definitely leave some time for questions. But the purpose of this panel today is I really want to thank Jay for working with me and helping to pull together a panel that will talk about national service and the transition to adulthood in America. Part of the reason that this group is gathered here is because the Aspen Institute has started a project called the Franklin Project. And I'd actually just like to ask Jay maybe to talk a little bit about what that project entails and kind of some of the history behind it.
Certainly. So at the 2012 Aspen Ideas Festival, General Stanley McChrystal was on a panel that had very little to do with national service. And at the end of the panel, it was in the Q&A portion, and someone in the audience asked him, what do you think about the draft? Should we reinstate it? And as most generals do, he didn't answer the question that was asked of him. He answered the question that he wanted to answer. And he said, you know, I'm not sure if I believe in the draft or not, but what I am sure is that we've allowed our citizenship to degrade to a point where it's more about rights, less about responsibilities. And we've gotten to a point where serving is this concept that has turned into someone else's job. You know, about 1% at any given time of our population serves in the military. About 2% of the United States population in total are veterans of our current wars. Lowest numbers in history. So he said what we really need to do is enhance our citizenship. And the way to get there is to create the opportunity, the expectation for everyone to serve their country for a year. Not necessarily in the military, but also as a civilian. Over the course of the next year, that came together as the Franklin Project. They put together a nice leadership council, including leaders such as Shirley and Harris. And that's what the Franklin Project is. Our mission is to make a year of full-time national service a common opportunity, a cultural expectation, and a civic rite of passage for every young American at some point between the ages of 18 and 28.
Thank you. It's a great overview, and I appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Yeah.
Harris, why did you get involved with the Franklin Project? Why did you say yes when they asked you to be on the leadership?
Because I was lucky. Because I've been waiting for something that can break the political stalemate with this idea and democratize national service, so that the definition of national service and the way to be part of what the Congress and the government and the present state of things declares is you need to get a contract, a grant from the Corporation for National Service, which I once headed
Right.
When we needed to save it after the House of Representatives in Clinton's time, when the sweep of both houses to the other party came, AmeriCorps was terminated by the House of Representatives. And it's been a roller coaster ride of a great and simple idea that Clinton campaigned on, that William James first talked about way back at the turn of the century, that a year or more of full-time, sustained, hard-working national service should be the rite of passage for every young person. Clinton said that the most popular response from his campaigning for president was when he said, having seen a national service program sit a year and saying that's what we ought to have for all people, was he conveyed to the people he was going to get a program where their children, the children of the listeners, the young people, they would know that the support for a year of full-time service was going to be there when they come of age. And General McChrystal triggered a new stage where, though we want and hope that the Serve America Act, which authorized 250,000 positions for national service, will begin to be funded. It was authorized with bipartisan support, but it hasn't been funded. It's where we started. And we need a new startup that's not tied necessarily to the House of Representatives and a grant, but is an idea that has caught the imagination of the culture of America and the people of America. We hope what is called the Franklin Project in honor of a great volunteer and innovator, Benjamin Franklin. We hope that that will be produce a quantum leap in many other sources, developing national service programs that get certified by a system that Shirley Sagawa has been spending a lot of time making sure that
You're jumping ahead, Harris. You're jumping ahead.
Unlike some well-known technical platforms, she's working very hard to see that the technical platform that will make all this available to everyone doesn't break down and is successful.
Very good. All right. So Shirley, why did you say yes when someone asked you to be on the leadership circle of this group?
It's kind of the reason I said yes when I was first asked to work on this issue by Senator Kennedy in 1987.
There you go.
It wasn't, I wasn't unlike some folks who kind of came to this through their own sort of epiphany that national service is what our country needed. I actually thought what we needed was a way to solve child poverty, and that's why I'd gone to work in the Senate, and that's where I met Harris eventually. We were working on legislation to kind of pilot this idea. Harris was one of the small group of people who were helping Senator Kennedy think this through, and we had a demonstration program. And I was really adamant that if we're going to spend money on this, we've got a lot of really important things we need to spend money on. We have education programs that are underfunded. We've got child care. We've got any number of things. So this has to stand up in terms of what it can do, and we saw that. Those programs that we funded from that demonstration, not only changed the lives of people serving, but they actually got really important things done in communities and changed the way communities interrelated in very important ways. So I've been kind of, we always say National Service is like the Hotel California. You can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. And so here we are, still doing this. But I never thought, what's funny is I spent most of my time as a policy person, and I do a lot of management consulting work with organizations. So those have been my two bread and butter projects for the last, since the end of the Clinton administration, when I was fired and got to go work as a consultant. So, but I never thought I would be sort of a tech entrepreneur, but I kind of feel like that's what we're doing. We're taking the best of technology that we use in our everyday lives for almost at least I do. I mean, getting a cab on Uber and, ordering my groceries on Peapod. And if I want to figure out, do I want to choose this person as a babysitter, I can go on care.com and check their ratings. Well, none of that exists in National Service. We're way, way, way behind. So I thought we need to build this platform.
One supplement. When I said I was lucky, let me tell you what the luck was. I was traveling on a troop ship converted to be a student ship for the first time, going back to Europe in 1947 with students packed on the boat. And I was looking forward to Europe. And there was a group of young men singing night and day, too late at night. And on the second day, I went up and cornered one of them. Very upright, well-dressed, even on a student ship, but singing. And I said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "We're Mormons. And when a Mormon man comes of age, the question is not, will you do a service year or more? Will you do it as a missionary that helps people, and not whether you would?" And we've chosen Europe to go to the devastation of Europe and to be of help. And just as Clinton said when he saw City Year, the light bulb went off in his head, and he said, "This is what it should be for all." I said to myself, this was 1947, I said to myself, that's what should be possible for every young person coming of age.
Let me just add one thing, because I think that the question of why get involved with the Franklin Project is a really important one. And to me, having been working on this for a long time, what's really different is having the military leadership of General McChrystal and Jay and many others who are involved in this come from a military background. And when I was first working on this issue, one of the critiques that we were getting was, well, no one's going to want to join the military, and we're really concerned about that, and it's going to hurt military recruitment. We have not seen that be a problem. And so to have now the leadership of this movement coming from the military is really important. And to me, that was just a really good reason to get involved.
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, it's for two reasons, really. Number one, back at the inception of this movement in 1990, we hadn't really been at war for a long time. And so typically when, it's very easy to look at what we're trying to do as the draft. It's not.
Right.
We're not at all trying to do that, even
Right.
a little bit. But it takes a 5-minute conversation to learn that that's not what we're trying to do. The military, for very good reasons, doesn't want to compromise what's called the all-volunteer force. They like the fact that you have to volunteer to join.
Right.
It costs a little bit more money to train you, and the Army is very professional. The difference now is that after being at war for 13 years, and a sentiment that a lot of the countries can just sort of tune it out because so little of the country serves, that the bigger risk here is a disengaged citizenship. So we need to create some mechanism by which every citizen can feel like they own a piece of the country and really feel involved and really feel bought in to the idea of what it is to be an American. And so that's a huge shift in terms of the military. And also the military says, listen, you can't just make the military twice as big to give the opportunity for everyone to serve. That's make work.
Right.
But there is a nonprofit industry that's nimble enough nowadays to host young people that want to serve, so that people should have those opportunities. That's number one. Number two, there's often an argument that doing these sorts of opportunities, service years, would impinge upon military recruitment. Well, That's false for two reasons. Number one, only about a third of the United States is eligible for military recruitment for physical, which that doesn't speak well to the health of our country.
Well either. That's a whole
but it's
different
true.
topic that we could.
Number two, we're talking about a service here, and there's no reason why a young person that gets more civically engaged for a year wouldn't then say, I like this.
Why don't I go ahead and consider
so.
joining up? Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thank you. So what are some of the strategies, before we get into a couple of other questions, but what are some of the strategies that the Franklin Project is looking at in terms of how to engage or how to help make a year of service become part of the national equation?
Sure. So I'll start with that, and then I'll turn it over to Shirley to talk about the platform.
Good.
She embodies one of the strategies.
The way that we talk about it internally is really what we're trying to do is make some sort of new cultural norm.
Okay.
A new rite of passage into adulthood.
Okay.
So the prevailing condition for that is it has to be the right idea for its time. I think it is. We can talk later about why I think that is, but
Sure.
I think it is. Then there's three sorts of things that you have to change, I think. You have to create a new infrastructure to allow this idea to take shape. And we don't really need to create a new one so much as we have to expand upon the existing one. You have to attach that idea to existing institutions.
Yep.
Schools, employers, et cetera. A high school diploma wouldn't mean anything if you didn't need a high school diploma to get a job. So you need to attach to existing institutions. And then the third piece is you need to create a language that makes the idea organically spreadable by everyone. As you're doing those three things all along the way, you need a mechanism by which you can connect the infrastructure to the institutions to the language. I think that our technology platform allows us to make connections in a very unique way. You need to be really persistent and realize that this is a 10-year thing. This isn't a one-year thing.
Right.
And then you need to measure your progress all along the way, because especially at the outset, some of our initial assumptions are going to be wrong. So we need to constantly check our progress and recalculate our assumptions. But that's our general approach, and I'll let Shirley talk specifically about the platform.
Yeah, let me just talk about the platform for a minute in the context of my own experience. The last time I was at this conference, I think, my son was with me, and he was maybe 7. He had just written a book of poems that he sold to raise money to support preserving endangered species. And he's now 21, and he's a junior in college. And I was trying to help him look for service opportunities. And we were just going over, I was on the AmeriCorps website, which doesn't have all the placements on it. I was on Idealist. I was on, Craigslist. I was all over the place. And I did find some, but it took, a lot of persistence. It shouldn't be that hard. It really shouldn't be. So that got me thinking, why shouldn't we have a way to search that's easy? I also was realizing that a lot of my clients were essentially national service organizations that had nothing to do with AmeriCorps, working with Code for America. Great organization. Not interested in being part of AmeriCorps. The mission continues, not part of AmeriCorps. So there were these wonderful programs that were growing up because there was, organic demand.
Right.
And they were not necessarily federally connected because of budget reasons or because they didn't want to be or they didn't fit the corporation's priorities. So why shouldn't we be able to essentially certify them? So, we're taking a little bit of the risk away from the young people by at least taking a look at these opportunities and saying, yes, this is national service, it's a real thing, it's not going to be an exploitation. So if we put those two ideas together, any organization can apply to be certified and be part of this community. AmeriCorps can be part of this community, eventually Peace Corps and international programs, although we're not starting there. And the search function, so that it's easy to find them, and the organizations can find the young people, that brings that together. And then we're putting a third element into this because what we have seen is that crowdfunding is taking off. So Kickstarter is now providing more funding for the arts than the National Endowment for the Arts. We want to keep the corporations funding. It is absolutely essential. We need to grow AmeriCorps to meet the goals of the Franklin Project. But if we look to government alone, we're leaving a lot of cash on the table. And there are parents, I think at the point I was trying to help my kid, I would have been happy to kick into a fund to make it possible for him to serve. And I know there are other parents who would. And even we did some market research on this idea, and we found that even people of very modest means felt that their community would rally around them and help create opportunities. So that's another function. We put together those three communities, people who want to support, people who want to serve, and organizations that need help. and we put them all together, and that would create a platform that we could then build on. So our next thing we're going to build is a way to connect that to learning, so that you can take online courses and get certificates for what you've learned, maybe get college credit, for what you've learned during your service experience by creating a portfolio and encouraging colleges to accept that portfolio for credit. So we're building all those pieces into one system that will make it a much more robust experience for young people. We'll let members connect with one another. We'll let community leaders connect with the programs and the people. We'll make it possible, maybe even earning rewards points. We're thinking about something along the lines of the rewards you get for spending a lot of money on your credit card. You should be able to get points for serving. So all of those things are commonplace in our everyday lives in other fields. We're bringing them together in one place, and we're making it for national service.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So,
there's two facts that I think give encouragement that events are calling for something like a system in which national service can grow up its roots in the popular culture. One is that programs being funded in whole or in part by AmeriCorps have 80,000 positions. Less than half of those are full-time positions, which we're talking about as the special forces of this idea. The 40,000 positions for full-time service, the programs that are applying for AmeriCorps, programs that AmeriCorps is funding, had more than 500,000 applications this last year.
right.
Think of all those people that were ready to serve, and
Who aren't
no one is taking
part of
action
AmeriCorps.
to
Right.
find a way
Right.
that they can do it. So it isn't that we've sat around and come up with a big idea. There's
You're meeting
an idea
demand.
that's
You're
being
trying to meet
pressed
demand.
upon
Right.
us, if we have any sense that something's wrong with that.
Right.
And the other part of it is that the programs, the organizations, the nonprofits that get grants are about 1 out of 10 who apply. And there ought to be a way in which those other nonprofits, colleges and universities, faith-based organizations,
Sure.
in some sense it can be very much carried by corporations, for-profit, that want a side that's supporting service. The ingredients are there if we're bright enough and persistent enough and
create the
imaginative
opportunities.
enough
Yeah.
to know how to make this experiment explode with power and popularity.
Thank you. So I think it was just before last summer's Aspen Institute for Big Ideas that happened when Voices for National Service, which is another pretty amazing coalition of largely national direct AmeriCorps organizations that have done a huge amount of advocacy and work to ensure that the Corporation for National and Community Service continues to get full funding and to increase AmeriCorps positions and Senior Corps and other aspects of the corporation. But two other members of your leadership circle who have been very vocal supporters of the Franklin Project were in attendance, and they were sharing about the Franklin Project, and that was Alan Casey and John Bridgeland. And they were talking about, kind of even before it has been as fleshed out now as it is, and it was still more of kind of a conceptual piece. And the question that I asked at that time was, I think this is an amazing idea and an amazing opportunity and a huge need, but there's about 76 million kids under the age of 18 in this country. And so what might be a strategy for ensuring that those 76 million kids want to and are coming up into their, as they age and are coming into the age of 18, that, all of a sudden they're probably not going to just say, oh, I want to, do a year of national service, or I want to join the military, or I want to give back to my country. And so what might some of the strategies be? And I know you guys have now started to talk a little bit about kind of a 13 to 18 strategy. And I'm kind of looking at Shirley because I know she's talked about this a little bit too. But what might some strategies be for ensuring that younger kids are maybe having some service experiences that perhaps are tied to their learning? Hint, hint, that are that might lead them to continuing to want to serve, and that you'll continue to see 500,000 plus people year after year after year choosing to do national service.
It's totally not a coincidence that there's this huge demand now, because the young people who've been coming up through the system have had more service learning than any generation in history, probably. And that's been a really important factor, I think, in the demand side. And now as we see the federal money for service learning essentially gone away, we need to be much more creative so that we can keep that energy going. So one thing I'm hoping will happen is that a lot of the national service positions will be service learning coordinators. And there's nothing that, once we have the certification up and running, there's nothing that would stop any PTA or school or local foundation from creating a service learning position, raising their own funding, and you getting it approved through the system, and then having the chance to pick from this amazing array of people who are going to be applying to serve. We're sure of it. So that's one thing I really hope will be a big benefit of the platform.
And Harris was there, but on March 28th, we hosted a convening at the Aspen Institute centered around this question. There were 32 youth service organizations represented there. It was co-hosted by Youth Service America. We had 4-H, Future Farmers of America, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, NYLC,
Yep.
a number of other organizations there. The big thing, as you just said, is people will not do this if the first time they hear about a service year is when they turn 18. Yeah. That's of course the case. The good news, as we've indicated, is more young people volunteer today than they ever have before. I've seen one number that's 57%. I've seen another number that's like 30%. Whatever. It's a lot of young people that volunteer. As context, in fiscal year 2012, the Department of Defense's training and recruitment budget was $11 billion. The Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps had to recruit 150,000 people into the active duty armed forces with an $11 billion budget. It's about $70,000 per recruit. The point is, we need to, and this, if we want 1 million people to serve, we need to recruit 6 times as many people per year.
Right.
And we probably won't have $11 billion to do it. I'm just guessing.
Could you work on that, though? That'd be great.
But here's the thing. Because so many young people volunteer, and the moment you finish volunteering, it's an amazing feeling, right? The moment that you give back to something, it's an amazing feeling. There's no reason the moment that you finish your volunteer work that you don't get a pitch for a service year. So I think that what the platform provides us is, hey, young folks, you just did this amazing work. Did you know that you can do this for a year when you're done with high school? And we have an opportunity where you can do that now. So that's the gist of it. And the big thing we learned in the convening was the reason that young people don't know about this thing yet is because it doesn't exist as a broad enough opportunity yet. So the better that we can do to get the language right and create pathways where when young people are serving, they immediately hear about a service year, the likelier we are to get young people signed up.
Gotcha. Harris, do you have any thoughts about service learning, engaging young people in service before they turn 18?
I think of my own trajectory in education. I had the break of World War II, being in the Army Air Corps, graduating early so that we could get into the Air Corps in 1944. And I was at the tail end, so I didn't get into danger and battle, as Jay has, at all. But it was a break from classroom education. I think if the war hadn't come, probably I would have done what my 3 children have done, gone from 8 years, 12 years of elementary and secondary education, then straight on to high school, straight on to 4 years of college, 16 years, and then I ultimately went to law school, 3 years, without a break.
Right.
It seems to me my children did fine doing that. And, you know, they had good summers too. I don't want to hit too hard on this. But for many, many people, there should be breaks. There should be going out into the world and discovering what the world is like, as well as studying what it's like in a classroom. Service learning can make those years better. Secondly, service learning does take you out of the classroom and into dealing with problems there. So people that have had that have been lucky too. But I was lucky that I had that break. Then college, I got stirred by Mahatma Gandhi as somebody that was pointing the way to how you crack the atom of civic power and people's power. And I got a fellowship to go on the trail of Gandhi before he was killed. He was killed before my wife and I got there, but we had this fellowship for us for a year, and a year to write a book about it together, and our marriage survived. But I had all those big breaks. I think that just thinking in terms of the educational pattern, timing, whether it's thanks to added impetus of Franklin Project, or we're all part of Voices, whether one way or the other we can expand it. We need educationally to make the case, and many educators are now making it. And Jake and Shirley can also talk about what Tufts, for example, has done, is stirred by this idea in saying that if I'm getting it right, because I wasn't there, but up in Tufts, where I have a grandson in the first year, a devoted National Service supporter is the head of a Tisch Institute, and one of its key projects that's just been started is that in the year 2015, a new track will open in which you can apply and get admitted to Tufts, but you have 1 year service year that you do before you start on campus the classes. It's called the 1 in 4 pattern. I was at William and Mary, where they like the 4+1, and I understand Tulane likes that. You do your 4 years in college, but you know that at some point you know that you want afterwards, before you find the right career or start it. You want challenge out in the world. So the 4 years of college plus 1 service year makes sense. For a lot of people, I think in the middle of college, a service year would be very good, and they'd come back from a year the way they come back from semesters of service and study abroad. Come back enriched by what you saw and with new curiosity.
I think that's great. I just want to offer an opportunity for someone from the audience to ask a question. Are there any questions for the panel? Rosemary.
Rosemary Pizzuto from Campfire. One of the things that I'm really dedicated to this year of service connected to high school, college, or that experience. But one of the things that I'm most concerned about, and as you were talking, really hit me, is the amount of debt that so many of the young people are incurring, secondary to the cost of college these days. And when they do that service at the end of college, the kick-in of having to make immediate repayment, and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering, in the whole process of things that you've done, if you looked at how do we work with financial institutions or the Congress or whoever to take and find some remediation of the debt by virtue of participation in community service as these young people serve in their communities and really give back at a much reduced compensation than they might in the normal work environment.
So in the AmeriCorps program, there is, you get an education award that you can use to repay some student loans, and you also get forbearance and deferral. We are trying to figure out how we can convince Congress to give at least the forbearance and deferral to the people who are serving in certified programs, and then we're looking to colleges and universities to match to provide a private ed award or to otherwise make it easier. We're also by building in college credit opportunities into the year of service, that will make it easier for people to graduate faster, to pay less per credit, as it were, which we think will help with college degree attainment. So for the one group that doesn't get helped by any of that are the people who are serving after college who still have debt, and that is a challenge. The forbearance and deferral would help a lot, we hear. College debt it's a bigger issue than any of us can take on, but I think we can find little ways that we can make it easier to serve.
And it speaks to a larger question, which is, and this was when we had our youth convening, the biggest barrier to entry for a person that just turned 18, am I going to do a year of service, is where we are right now as a society that feels like an interruption on an otherwise straight path. So beyond the loan forbearance, ideally an education award, really, really important. But we generally need to look at every institution in our society and say, how can we make doing a year of service advantageous to the young person? It should, even if you can't get legislation for it, companies should say, if you've done a year of service, we will take a closer look at you in our hiring practices. And one of our jobs is to help build the case that hiring someone who's done a service year makes business sense. So you really need to embed it in the outcomes of our country's institutions to make a service year an advantageous experience to your career progression.
In that process that you're doing, are you setting some standards for what that service year should look like?
Oh, yeah.
So that there's that career service connection and young folks can build a portfolio off of that?
We're really thinking about that intensively now. We have basic, essentially certification criteria that tend to mirror what's in AmeriCorps. But what I think actually AmeriCorps doesn't do as well as it could is this transition piece. We know that AmeriCorps alum says that's their most in-demand course that they offer, and there's just a lot more we could do. So we're thinking of requiring every program to get a mentor for every Corps member. So that would be like the first thing you would do. So there's an adult in the community who can help you navigate. We also
I'm sorry, Shirley, do you mean the transition from your year of service?
From your year of service into either college or to a career, but assigned to help you during your year of service as well, so that you have them from day one and you're getting that kind of counseling from day one. Somebody you can turn to when the service day is bad, somebody that will help you out in whatever way. And then the second thing is to think about how we can make the actual service that you're doing kind of really map to a set of skills that employers are looking for. And we know that a lot of youth development programs do that. National service hasn't really been held to that standard. A lot of them do, but we want it to be much more universal so that everybody who serves, when you apply for the position, these are the skills that you're going to develop on the job. These are the skills you have to come in with. Maybe you need to come in being able to speak Spanish, or maybe you need to come in knowing something about sports, but that you are valued for what you bring, and then you're going to develop in the position. And then we're looking to some corporate partnerships to help those become mapped to things that employers are really looking for. So we're trying to do all of these kinds of things to make, it's amazing to me. I do a lot of work in other issues, and I do a lot of work in workforce development. And when the world of workforce development, when the opponents in Congress commissioned a study of federal workforce programs and said, oh my gosh, there's 47 of them, they're all uncoordinated, this is so terrible. AmeriCorps was not one of them. They don't consider that a workforce program. And and I know, and that when you look at any any nonprofit, the likelihood of having somebody, I was talking to one the other day, literally every person on the staff was a former AmeriCorps member. It's just where you go to get your workforce development for the helping sector. Right. So, we need to be more intentional about that and make sure people know that this is something that's really contributing to society in yet another way that they're not aware of.
And maybe that intentionality needs to also go the other way, that the nonprofits, the service community, the corporations need to be educated on the role they play in making sure that national service component is very clear. Because I see a lot of kids that come to us that have done service, and it's been like fly by night, no structure, no goals, no objectives, and you'll say to them, well, how does this tie to preparing or completing your portfolio? And they go, oh, well, they just had me come in and I swept the floor and I, set the tables and stuff like that. And so teaching the agencies and the businesses the importance of the intentionality of what they're doing, I think is as important as teaching the young people that what they're doing has a outcome that can be career related.
Good points.
General McChrystal likes to talk of the need this country has of big ideas. And I think we're talking about one big idea that would be good for the country for a lot of different reasons. I don't think anyone here wants to minimize the other need of a big idea related to the mounting burden of student debt. Just the fact that it's mounting the way I know it's mounting with my grandchildren, for example, it's going to have to be faced. The Clinton proposal for national service, now long ago in the turning in 1900 and in the campaign beginning the 1990s, was that the education award would be $10,000 a year. Long ago, it was $10,000 a year. It's now 5,000.
It's tied to the Pell Grant, so it's a little more than 5,000.
Now it's tied to the Pell Foundation. So we're waiting to see what that other big idea is going to be. I think, at least I would say that the big idea that we're getting our hands around and pursuing and thinking about night and day is the one we're talking about on the stage. But I'd like to see a Franklin project for the problem of student debt.
It's true. It's true.
And they're linked clearly, so we'll see how others pick up and to what extent we can really be part of helping to solve it. The reason he wanted $10,000 a year is he wanted it to be big and real enough so it really is helping pay off a loan if you have the loans and to go to college if you're afraid you can't afford it.
So there's also a huge shift in this country in terms of the demographic trends and changing nature of our society. And so I'm curious if you've thought about that in terms of, or what strategies you might be thinking about to encourage lots of different kinds of kids from lots of different backgrounds, and particularly youth in poverty, and how that might factor into, it's something that we're thinking about obviously within service learning, but again, how do you think about addressing those changing demographics within the Franklin Project?
So so the first thing is we intentionally state up front that if we don't engage opportunity youth in service, that we failed. So that's the first thing, is admitting that. The second thing is admitting that that's really, really hard. You can create an incentive structure for people of a certain level of means, and that will pull them into service. But reaching opportunity youth, it's less of a magnet, and you more really got to reach out and intentionally grab them.
Right, and so opportunity youth, in case if you're not familiar with that term, are basically, it's now a sort of a newer definition of young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are either not employed or not in school.
And I think,
Actually, both. I misspoke. Who are both? Yeah, who are not in school or employed.
And I'll let Shirley is good with this, but one thing that I love about the technology platform approach is that there are, grabbing opportunity youth requires nuanced local solutions from nonprofits that understand their space better than anyone else. I'm not confident that a federal opportunity youth corps or something could be nuanced enough to figure out this problem in many local contexts. But by creating a platform that empowers the local nonprofit, whose mission from day one is empower opportunity youth in our community by providing them an opportunity to serve full time. And our platform provides an avenue where we can lift them up and connect them to a larger narrative of everyone serving. That, I think, gives us the biggest chance of success. But in the longer run, we need to figure it out, and it's one of our toughest problems.
So actually, I want to speak to the sort of broader demographic questions. I think you covered the opportunity youth very well. I feel like one of the great strengths of young people today is how diverse they are. And but yet we have a society that's tremendously segregated residentially and in many other ways. So this is a chance to break through that and find common ground and find ways that we can all support each other. And you know, young people today, they don't have all the isms we had. And that's what's one of the many, many great things about young people. So this is a way to continue that narrative of bringing people together across all the different lines. The other demographic trend, though, is the aging of America, that there's so many baby boomers who are aging.
They're very young.
Yeah, and that's right.
I'm 7 years old.
7 years. But we know we're going to have a lot of need for intergenerational opportunities. Best way for people to stay healthy when they're older is to serve. So that's an opportunity in of itself. But second, you know, one thing AmeriCorps has not prioritized is programs that involve young people, helping older people live independently. We've talked a lot about the health care costs on the news and you know, everything that's happening with Obamacare. I'll tell you, the thing that's coming down the pike is a lot of older people who are going to need nursing home care, which costs, last time I looked, $70,000 to $80,000 a year. And if we can help even one, you know, if one National Service member can help one person, you know, remain in their home instead of being on Medicaid in a nursing home, they will have paid for their position and 3 others. So this is an opportunity that we have to take advantage of the demographics in a win-win-win situation.
Yeah, I think that we should treat both as a challenge and as a boon. Yeah. That there's the diversity we have when we're talking about national service. The first great national service program was Franklin Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps. He found on his desk when he came into the Oval Office a report saying 500,000 young men were out of school, out of work, on the streets, and he said, I want to get those boys in the woods. And he assembled the appropriate cabinet people and gave them their assignments, and he said, I want a bill right away. And within a few days, they got and sent to Congress a bill that was just 2 pages of substance, just 2, not 1,000 or 2,000 pages, authorizing the President of the United States to form this Civilian Conservation Corps. It was designed to get unemployed, out of educational institutions, at work. On the Roosevelt Memorial, you see the carving of Roosevelt saying the material things are vital in what we're doing, but the spiritual effect is even greater. It's a wonderful quotation. However, that's the demography. They had, in 8 years before they graduated, those men of the CCC graduated into the military national service. They planted 3 billion trees. More than 3 million young people had a chance to turn their lives around. Now, what do we have now? We have in national service now, at one end, Teach for America, seeking the most outstanding graduates of the most effective colleges, being treated like rare beginning, opening teachers of the school system. At the other end, you have Youth Build. Youth Build was founded for dropouts, for those that were in the same condition that Roosevelt had. They've been phenomenally successful in helping in service being done, in learning the building of houses for young and turning their lives around. In between are a whole range of things, including the city year that Clinton fell for, which wants teams of diverse people from high school dropouts to college and professional graduates. And that variety is powerful, beautiful, and complicating. And I think that seeing the picture in its diversity is going to make the invitation to the imagination that is going out of this idea to the nonprofit world and the profit world is going to be one, I hope, of benefits of what we're up to.
So what role might young people themselves have in advancing this kind of an idea?
Colleges have the opportunity, I hope they're going to, with this system, if it works, it will be in many cases students that plan a service year program for students of that college. Same thing could happen in high school, namely those that are going to go straight from high school to some kind of service. You know, the teachers who are part of service learning can be a part of what's the next chapter, but the students by then out of service learning may have, many of them may have the skills and leadership ability to start a national service program.
So a good example of that was Laura from Manateens, who, you know, she was doing service as a young person. She started a service club in Manatee County, Florida that was tremendously successful. She eventually became an AmeriCorps Promise Fellow, essentially running that. So I could see young people, you know, who they've learned through their service learning experiences how to create service projects that they might then go back to their school or to their community organizations and say, okay, apply for a certified position that I'm going to apply for so that I can, you know, continue on this work in a much bigger way. I think that would be really tremendous. And, you know, at one point, Manateens was engaging 2/3 of the kids in Manatee County, which is quite something, all started by a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the answer is serve. I mean, that's the long and short of it. I think what we're offering, if we can be successful, is so 71% of millennials list meaningfulness as one of the 3 most important things in a career. Alternatively, this generation of young people has lower levels of social trust than any other generation. But it's not 1969. They're not anti-establishment. I just don't think that there's yet an institution that's reflective of their values. And I think if we do this right, we could provide them just such an institution. So how can young people help? I think at the end of the day, it's we can serve. I mean, if we can provide the opportunity.
That's great. I think I had shared with you, Jay, maybe that when kind of thinking about this panel and thinking about coming together around this conference and kind of in advance of the convening that happened that you mentioned, which I want to circle back to as well. The National Youth Leadership Council, we have a National Youth Advisory Council, and a small handful of those folks are able to serve as an advisor to me. I basically said, well, we have this amazing group of 13 young people, and you know, I need some advice too. And so thankfully a few of them were willing to kind of be the, sort of a silly name to me, but like the CEO committee. And so, but it's great. And so at least once a month we get together and I have a chance to ask them some questions and just interact and engage with them. And so I asked them kind of a similar question. What did they think about the Franklin Project? What were some of their ideas? What were some of the challenges that they saw? And one idea that they shared with me is that in order for young people to have a better sense of what that year of service might be, would be almost, so it's similar to the mentoring concept that you were sharing. So a member of the community mentoring an AmeriCorps member, and it was Sam's suggestion actually, and he was saying that maybe it would be helpful to, if there was an opportunity to sort of shadow an AmeriCorps member. Cool. So someone who's, you know, in junior high, elementary school, junior high, high school, to have a chance to shadow somebody who is doing a year of service. So maybe someone who's certified, not necessarily just in AmeriCorps, but who's doing that year of service.
You know, we're not trying to start a new organization, bureaucracy, all the rest. Not at all. We're all part of the Voices for National Service, but now the National Youth Leadership Council. You know, my hope is that you and the council of this amazing experience that you had can be a source of leadership in ways that I'm not imagining. That you're the ones that ought to imagine some of the ways in which young people can be leaders in this. I would even put it the other way. Unless that happens, thanks to you and all of us, unless young people take hold of this, it's not going to happen on the scale we want. if the students at the University of Michigan, hearing John Kennedy give at 2 a.m. The remarks in 1960, when Kennedy was late, he had no speech to give. Extemporaneously, he talked about, would you go to Ghana and give you some service years of your life? If the students hadn't picked that idea up and taken a scroll around, a petition around, and getting about 1,000 students to say, yes, we'd go if you form a program, it would, the getting of a Peace Corps might never have come about. It was when the word was given to Kennedy in campaigning in the Middle West, when Ted Sorensen, his speechwriter, said they want to give this scroll of 1,000 students to you. It wasn't when he met the students or got the scroll. It was when he heard that, he turned to Sorensen and said, this is really hot idea. Let's propose. Can you make a proposal? Can we get a proposal together in the next week so that I can have a major talk? It turned out he did in the Cow Palace. And Sergeant Shriver repeatedly has said, without the initiative of the students, there's no reason to think the Peace Corps would have been, with all the other priorities, high on the list of anybody in the administration. So it's up to you.
Well, I mean, I think we've accepted the challenge. I think that, frankly, a lot of the work that NYLC has done over the last 30 years, and that is reflected, I think, in many of the organizations, the over 1,400 people who are convened for this conference, are doing in terms of engaging young people, both K-12 as well as in higher education, in service learning, and finding creative ways to continue to engage young people in service learning and the professional development for educators so that they really understand what is high quality service learning. How do you really connect that meaningful service? I couldn't agree with you more, Jay. That meaningful service opportunities where they're solving local problems and addressing challenges in their own communities with what we expect them to learn while they're in school. Or on the, speaking of Campfire and others who host a lot of, obviously, service learning opportunities within their out-of-school time programs during the summertime and summer of service opportunities. So we really are trying. We're trying to ensure that there are increasing opportunities and on larger scale opportunities. So looking at NYLC at least is really looking at expanding our district-wide model so we can have more than a teacher by teacher by teacher kind of approach, and really looking at serving and engaging with larger school districts, particularly those in communities in most need. So, over the next 3 to 5 years, our goal is to engage over 100,000 students through professional development with educators in schools and in K-12 settings. And so I'm going to misquote this probably, but I think if our estimates are right, and we'll continue to sort of check those as we go, but just in terms of the service component alone probably means more than 1 million hours of service back to those communities. So we are trying to do our part, and we, I think that there's a huge connection between service learning and engaging younger kids in service while they're also getting an education that hopefully then is continuing to provide that force, the 500,000 plus every year who want to serve a year of national service. So do you want to, can you speak to maybe some other ways that we might support each other, or maybe talk a little bit more about some of what came out of that convening last week?
I'm really just going to echo what you just said, but the biggest thing that I learned was I went into the convening thinking, okay, how do we reach kids when they're like 13 or 14 or 15? And the message we got from the room was like, that's way too late. So that was, and it's true. You need to provide a model for them to emulate at a very young age. And this is probably the most trite thing I say, but a thing's not a thing until it's a thing. So until a service year is a thing, there's no example for.
This is very profound.
Right?
Write that down.
So I got this job, right? No. Until there's a model for a 6-year-old. Like a 6-year-old can look in the TV and he sees a guy in a camouflage uniform and he knows, that's service to country. There's not a mechanism by which a 4 or 5-year-old kid can look at someone in a city or red jacket and go, oh, that's serving my country too.
Right.
So that's a narrative that we need to change, I think.
Well, two thoughts. I have, one is, you have a lot of teachers
Yes.
here at this great conference. Teachers, both in their own turf, and as educators, and the educational associations or unions can play a great role in this. And
That's a good point.
I would think, I hope, that a lot of the teachers who are here can spread the word that there's an idea growing that helps us as teachers, helps our students, and that teacher leadership in actually helping to shape programs, but also in moving the idea. I had, thanks to Jay, I got assigned to speak to the women's auxiliary of the American Legion, a packed room of 250 of their leaders from around the country. And when I first read their description of what I was about, Wendy Spencer of the Corporation for National Service in America and I were the two people sitting as we're sitting now. I read their description. It didn't say Franklin Project is launching a campaign to make this part of our culture. It didn't say AmeriCorps was doing or the corporation was doing. At first I thought bad grammar. It said the idea of a rite of passage for all young people is launching a campaign to make this a key part of American culture. And I suddenly said, that's in fact the way we ought to think about this. It's the idea that is launching the campaign, and we're trying to help. Really? And we have the National Council of Citizenship is helping Shirley's venture of the platform and hosting it. We're not trying to get a new monopoly. We're a little band that is having all of our imaginations stirred and need all the people together that could move this idea. And a year from now at your conference, just as we hope a couple of months from now, we will be at Gettysburg, for example, for the second summit on national service. I would hope that this great pleasant occasion right here next year with other people, you will find that the idea is growing within your ranks, and may it grow.
Thank you. Is there one more question from the audience? Yeah, Rosemary?
I'm just wondering if there's a pilot, if you're piloting it in any community, that collaboration between nonprofits, schools, businesses, and whatever, to create the financial and the social and the leadership kinds of piece to make it happen.
Yes.
Where?
And I'm in passing made the point that could be a big point if it proves out. I think there are a lot of corporations, large and small, and their foundations and the rest, that would like, in fact, to sponsor a service program. And I don't think anything in your system prevents a corporation to set up a service project within their support.
Within their nonprofits.
We're hoping that the generosity and wealth of the independent sector of America will rise with this idea and be a major part of it. And Campfire, way back when some of us were talking this way, I was one of the biggest champions of some of the things we've been talking about now. So the light is dim, but I think you said Campfire, right?
Yes.
And in terms of finding a city, it's a great question. And I would say we're on the search. We're we're on the lookout right now.
Got
So,
some candidates.
Yeah,
but,
got some candidates.
This is one of those things you kind of have to self-nominate for this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's a brilliant idea because what it like, if there's one lesson you learn from a youth convening, so we have a convening last week at Aspen Institute around one question: how can we transition young people that do volunteer work into a full year of national service? And we go into that convening thinking that it's a limited question, and what you end up finding out is that the ability for young people to turn iterative volunteerism into full-time service is contingent upon all these other systems buying in as well. And all the other systemic shifts are contingent upon the demand for young people to serve. So that's, to your point, finding a single place where you can manufacture all of those conditions in a limited experimental environment is something that we're actively looking to try to do. So if you have any candidates, let me know.
So what are next steps? What comes next? Harris sort of teed this up a little bit.
The word, I think, is pilot programs.
So pilot programs.
I'd like to see a lot of pilot programs that I can't imagine right now. I'm glad Tufts and half a dozen or more colleges and universities are showing great interest in moving forward on it in different ways.
I think so. We have this big summit we're doing in Gettysburg in June, which is really just going to be convening people from every sector and say, how is your sector going to contribute to this big idea? But I really think that the big idea we have going is this platform. And I think, you can imagine what some of the major institutional things that need to happen are if we're really going to get to 1 million people doing service years every year. But the way that I look at it is, we sort of need to put the date on the calendar and say, okay, this is about when the service year platform is going to be ready. And I don't know if based on news in the last 6 months or so, building websites for public consumption can be a tricky thing, and often initial rollouts are. So we're giving ourselves some time, but we put that date on the calendar and we say, okay, let's build everything around that. The day that platform gets launched, we need to have some businesses lined up for hiring incentives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's one thing. The second thing, I really think that this language change, the term service here, is tremendously important. I think the term national service means a lot of things to a lot of people. We've had meetings where we literally debate the meaning of national service.
We have.
And national service also means nothing to some people. The term service year is very self-delimiting. It connotes full-time for a year, and it's also not a term that in and of itself has been co-opted by any other thing yet. So I think that the term service year is really important in terms of just creating some language that's organically usable by everyone.
As you're just speaking, the whole concept of the nonprofit community needing the ability to build capacity and the need to partner with the businesses and the federal government and the state government and that kind of thing could be one of the places that starts, is finding a place that really needs to build capacity, looking at the service year as a means by which to accomplish that, setting up the system in place to work as a team to do that, and then have it happen. It just bubbled to my brain as you were speaking.
And I think the thing that's going to make this take off is a combination of the organizations that are already out there seeing the opportunity to grow by this particular form of human capital is the best way I can put it. I mean, it's not a volunteer, it's not a job, it's a lot more cost effective than, hire, and you're going to get a different kind of person in that job, in that service year position than if it were a job. So that's an important concept. I also think this generation is so entrepreneurial. It's another characteristic of millennials, is they're unbelievably entrepreneurial. And every year I get to read several different competitions for social entrepreneurs. Like I read Echoing Green a couple weeks ago, and these are the programs that are going to be built on the foundation of service year opportunities. So that's a place I want to go next to kind of really sell this.
On the legislative side, I think we need to make sure that as the legislation goes through on fair wage and all those kinds of things, that there's provisions in that legislation that allows for the service year at the similar to what happens in AmeriCorps, so that we don't get caught with some of the things we've been caught with recently, with whether or not an intern or a person doing a community placement is an employee or an intern. having to be connected with a fully engaged academic institution and blah, 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 all of that.
Right.
So we need to make sure that those
Great.
pieces are all part of
We've-
the bigger picture.
We've already started working on that issue, so we'll be calling for your help. Thank you.
Harris, did
Let
you
me
have-
make one seconding of what Jay just said about the service year. The chief ideological opposition to national service, as we're talking about it, service year, full-time and for the definition of a service year. The case against it is, I lived through the first decade of hearing this, paid volunteering is undermining true unpaid volunteering. And that was the song constantly sung, and still is sung. I'm doing the best I can to fish some Republicans in the forefront of the effort, and we're succeeding remarkably, but not enough yet. Full-time service automatically, I think, in people's heads, makes it clear that unless you're a saint or very wealthy, you're going to have some money to live on.
Resources, yes.
And it paid, yes, the Army is shocking. The Army actually is paid volunteering. So I think the argument gets won when it's full-time. And I think the service learning world fits beautifully on this. Service learning world is one of the most developed and effective parts of unpaid volunteering with young people in school. It's part-time, it's unpaid. There is something about the intensity of full-time service, bonding, comradeship, teamwork, and seeing something through for a substantial period of time. It has great power, and it's a natural for service learning to be a feeder to that, and vice versa. So I accept your service year as the telling and explaining point that I accept that national service does not accomplish, as two words, does not accomplish the clarity that we want. And we know we're just talking about one part of a great big field of citizen action.
Yeah. Well, I am a huge fan of all of yours, and I am sorry that we are coming very close to the end of our time together, because I could talk with all of you for the rest of the conference, and that would be just fine with me. But I'm wondering if there's a quick closing remark that each of you might like to make.
We'll let Harris close because he's usually pretty good at that. But
do you want to start, Jay?
Sure. I think we're not obviously calling for a draft. We're not calling for a conscription, but I have to say that. But we're 40 years on from when the draft went away. And if you look at what 40 years means in terms of a generation or two, I think that we might be at a tipping point in our culture where if we don't get this done now, it's not going to happen. So that's a challenge and it's a problem, but we also have an opportunity because young people actually want to do it. So the opportunity's there. It's the right idea for its time. And if we don't get it done right now, I don't think that it really has a shot in the long run. So I think it's a very important time for us.
Thank you, Jay. Sure.
I had one great teacher that helped shape my life, and he was behind getting the fellowship to go to India on the Trail of Gandhi. He left two watchwords that stuck with me. One was, we have to be more inventive if we're going to do our duty. And the other was the Socrates' rule, follow the question where it leads.
Wow. I don't want to say anything now. I would just like to say that I'm a big fan of yours, of all of you, and NYLC for many years has been just the stalwart supporter of service learning through thick and through thin. And I think that we're at a time when innovation is needed, and I look forward to having the service year be a partner with service learning to make this a universal experience across age groups. So thank you for inviting us. We really
Thank you
enjoyed
for
it.
Thank you.
accepting the invitation. And I just have to say that it even feels more fitting after this conversation that our theme for next year's conference, so we should start talking now
Okay.
about if the platform is up and running, that we should have a demonstration of that.
Yes.
We should, let's think about how to bring this to a maybe not a larger stage necessarily, but at least
Possibly a smaller
a
stage, a sound stage.
But the theme for the conference next year is more powerful together. And that feels very much like the
Great.
theme from our conversation today. So thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
And thank you for joining us. So.